Hello, I'm Susan Elliott, the news editor of Musical America. Today, we're going to be speaking with Heather Noonan. She's the Vice President of Advocacy for the League of American Orchestras. When we last spoke with Heather in April, we were talking about the federal relief program, thinking that we would be out of the pandemic, maybe through the end of the summer. Here we are in February of the following year. We're still here, and we have a new relief package coming our way. And Heather is going to tell us where and how to apply for specific kinds of grants, whether as an arts organization or as an individual working in the arts. Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
It's so good to be with you again.
Yeah, I was just looking back over our first meeting. It was last April. And I thought it would be good for us to sort of get an update on where we are with the latest support packages.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny when I reflect on it, the last time we talked, we were unpacking the CARES Act, which
Right.
had very many different provisions in it. And we were also anticipating another relief package that we thought was imminent because we knew that the effects of the pandemic would go well into the summer. We actually find ourselves in exactly that same place right now, where we're trying to understand everything that was in this package that was signed into law on December 27th. So we thought that this package would come much more quickly. It had a 9-month incubation period.
Oh my God.
And so we saw a lot of things transpire over the course of that time that steered the direction of the package. So the new package does include both a second round of Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loans, which we could get into in a minute maybe, but it does include this creation of a whole new approach to federal relief that the arts are eligible for. And the distinction is that this is not a loan, so not administered by the banks. These grants would be administered through the federal government as grants. And in fact, right now, we think it's likely that they'll be using the grants.gov portal to administer them.
The grant, what? Which portal?
Grants.gov.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a single portal that the federal government uses for most of the grants it makes on any particular topic. So one caveat I should probably start out with from the very beginning is we don't know the answers to all of the questions about how eligibility will work. But we have a couple of sources to draw from. One is the actual legislative text. So what did Congress write up and what was signed into law that SBA is working from? And then the other is that the SBA has started producing information on its website. They have a dedicated website for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grants Program, and they are kind of trickling out information about how it will work. So if you were to go to that page now, it's notable that the portal is not opened yet. They aren't accepting grant applications yet, but what they do have in place is an FAQ to help potential applicants understand how it will work.
Got it. Yeah. Do we have any sense of when those applications might be available?
That's a question everyone has in mind. And it's a really important one to be able to answer because one of the requirements in this overall relief package is that applicants can only choose either to go for a new Paycheck Protection Program forgivable loan in 2021 or pursue a Shuttered Venue Operators grant. And so the Paycheck Protection Program new round is open now. Last I heard yesterday, out of the $280 billion of Paycheck Protection Program funding that's now made available, about 100 billion has been issued by banks. So they're not, it doesn't appear they're moving through it quite as rapidly as they did in the first phase of the CARES Act PPP funding coming out, but they are starting to churn through those resources. And the Paycheck Protection Program loans are open until the end of March. So now groups have to think, do I initiate a PPP loan or do I wait for all of the clarity around how the Shuttered Venue Grants program will work and apply for that one, because the SBA has confirmed that the act of just applying for one or the other will disqualify you for the other program. So for instance, if an organization applies for PPP right now, they will not have access to Shuttered Venue grants unless SBA for some reason rejects that application. So that this moment right now of deciding between the two programs is really where a lot of eligible entities are sitting and trying to make a decision.
One question, the new PPP loans, forgivable loans, are coming from banks or from the Small Business Administration?
So technically, the Small Business Administration administers the Paycheck Protection Program. So all of the forms that are created and the guidance is up on the SBA website. And that website is the definitive resource for how PPP works. To initiate an application, an applicant goes to a bank. So the bank facilitates and manages the loan.
And in 2020, were those forgivable loans?
For the most part, they were. So in order to be eligible for forgiveness, if an applicant chooses the forgiveness path, they had to use the funds in certain ways. So one basic requirement was that at least 60% of Paycheck Protection Program loan funds be used to support payroll costs. And so a lot of organizations find themselves right now applying for forgiveness for their first loans last year. And then at the same time contemplating, do I take a second draw of a PPP loan? Or again, do I go this route of the Shuttered Venue Operators grant instead?
And shuttered venues is, if we ever see it, is more flexible, is it not? I mean, it can include things like operating costs and so forth and so on.
Right, and you know, the organizations that were making the case on the Hill for why do we need another program really emphasized that point, is that for a number of venues, the biggest stress on the organization is the fixed costs that they carry even while they're shuttered. So with the Shuttered Venue grants, you can see that there's an array of eligible expenses that include utilities, rent, mortgage, some limited ability to other production costs that you might have continued to incur are part of the mix. Payroll is also an eligible expense for Shuttered Venue grant funding. And it's actually more generous than PPP in at least one regard. And that is that grantees can use Shuttered Venue funds to pay 1099 workers. So you might recall with the Paycheck Protection Program, when you're using your funds for eligible costs, it was limited to W-2 employees.
To staff, staff as opposed to,
Yeah, and in the arts where we use a real mixture of both of them, that employment relationship is really all over the place. It's good to have another option like this one. The federal government is calling it the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, but for now it's all the same thing. And Save Our Stages, I think, is a much more compelling name because it really says what it's meant to be.
And are those larger in size than the PPP loans are?
So it depends on the applicant and what their business model looks like. So the differences are and it also depends on whether you're in your first or second attempt at a paycheck protection loan. So for those who are going, and most would be contemplating a second PPP, it's the same formula as before. About 2.5 months of your payroll costs is what your maximum amount would be. Second draw loans are capped at $2 million. So that's a little, lower threshold than we saw in the first round. And for the Shuttered Venue grants, it's a completely different calculation. So applicants would look at their 2019 calendar year, and they'd look at earned revenue in the course of 2019, and then they would take 45% of that amount, and that's their maximum grant amount, up to $10 million. So in a way, it depends on what your earned revenue mix looks like. How big of your overall budget is your earned revenue compared to 2.5 months of payroll costs. And then you'd also be keeping in mind, those caps.
Now, I remember from the last go round that you had a lot of partners in pulling this together between the grassroots, which you mentioned, and then working with nonprofits in general. So the Save Our Stages gang was largely for-profit, correct?
Well, so it was a mix.
Yeah,
So the National Independent Venues Association
right.
was spearheading this effort, and they actually created that association in the wake of COVID-19, specifically responding to this need.
Uh-huh.
And they used a terrific grassroots network of both venue operators and also concert goers, event goers,
Hmm.
to make the case to Congress about this unique need. And NEVA encompasses both for-profit and nonprofit venues. So there was recognition from the beginning of this idea that there would be need in both areas. And a number, as soon as the bill was introduced, a number of organizations, including the League, stepped in to help support the advocacy in getting this across the finish line.
Hmm.
The coalition, also newly formed in the wake of COVID, Performing Arts Managers and Agents Coalition, also was involved in intense advocacy efforts. And then when you look across the whole spectrum of national arts organizations, everyone was weighing in to make the case to Congress for this unique form of support. So absolutely was a full partnership across the community. The third major provision available in this December bill is an employee retention tax credit that we partnered with our colleagues in the wider nonprofit sector to advocate for expanding. So the first thing to know is this credit is available to nonprofits. If the value of it exceeds your payroll taxes, you'll actually be getting that funding from the federal government. And the long and the short of it is, without going into too much detail, is that it basically rewards your organization for retaining employees on your payroll in the course of the pandemic. So that's available retroactively for 2020, as well as in 2021.
So the other issue, if I can shift here, is just where do independent contractors fit into this? If I am a director or a conductor or a singer or a violinist, and I'm not employed by a large group, large organization, how do I get support?
Yeah, so a couple of things to note. One is that the Paycheck Protection Program fund is also accessible to self-employed workers. So I
Right.
think a number of them really made use of it. And the hardest part about using it last year is that the guidance just kept changing, right? So it was really hard to keep up. And I know that for anyone who's a self-employed worker, the last thing they're prepared to do is take on a liability at this moment. And so there was a lot of caution around approaching the PPP program. I would just advise everyone to consider it and talk with your lender so that you know well how it works. I think the guidance is a little clearer now that we've got almost a year of that program out and rolling. So PPP is definitely an option there. The other is just a reminder that the pandemic unemployment benefits have been extended. And states also are administering a extra bit of pandemic unemployment benefits for workers who have a mixture of W-2 and 1099 income. So one problem that we saw with the pandemic unemployment benefits was that states would only recognize one form of income or the other. And for very many artists, they may have an employment relationship with one organization, work as an independent contractor for another, and should be receiving unemployment benefits that take into account all of the revenue they would have received. So there's a little bit of help added there in the December package because in addition to the weekly $300 pandemic unemployment relief, there's an extra $100 for mixed earners. I would just say, in addition to that, the Shuttered Venues program and these employee retention tax credits are both meant to be an incentive to help the whole ecosystem of venues, right? And the tax credits meant to support the whole ecosystem of corporations and nonprofit organizations in supporting people through payroll. So everything that Congress does to improve those programs is also meant to support the workforce that's engaged in our sector.
When you're in negotiation with the members of government, who do you talk to? What does a typical advocacy meeting look like?
Yeah, well, here's the thing that's really important to note is that the most important advocacy meetings that happen aren't by hired experts like myself. They are by local people who are constituents of their members of Congress. That members of Congress, especially in the lead up to the election and now immediately following it, are very aware about being responsive to local needs in their community. And the very best messengers for that are going to be voters back in their own district and state. And one kind of byproduct of the way that we convene now through Zoom like this is that you don't have to fly to Washington to have a meeting with your member of Congress, right? Or their staff.
Yeah.
You can access them just like we are here today. So I would just say a typical meeting would be one like this. When it comes down to, how does the legislation actually get written and made? It's extraordinary staff people who staff each of these congressional offices that do the writing, listen closely to what constituents have to say, really take in the real world impact of what's being created through these relief packages. So for anyone out there who's looking for a meeting with their elected official and are told, could you first talk to the staff person? Just remember, they're among the most influential people in this process. And they're doing a lot of the real work and real writing on the fine print. So most of our time is spent engaging with the staff who are really hold the keyboard as this legislation gets drafted.
I have a question about if you're willing to make any sort of prediction about the way that National Endowment for the Arts will look under the new administration.
Oh yeah, we're really excited that it might look like it has more money. That's terrific. I have to say it was really no small accomplishment that this agency stayed its course over the last 4 years. And again, just amazing leadership at the agency in the last 4 years, and staff administering the programs day in and day out. Already just yesterday, so we're now already working on the next relief package. Like we're still trying to understand what happened in December, right? That we're just this week, Congress is moving the next relief package through.
Wow.
And yesterday, the leadership in Congress offered up a special COVID relief fund to be administered by the NEA of $135 million.
Wow.
In addition to its regular annual appropriation. So that's already a great sign. More COVID relief administered by the NEA may be coming if this crosses the finish line in the next couple of weeks. So really in just another few weeks, we should have even more information about what's available for artists, arts organizations, and the wider sector.
Wow. Wow. It's a lot. Well, so keep us posted. And thank you. Thank you so much. You're just a font of information. And we should tell people to go to the portals at the Small Business Administration, yeah?
Yeah.
And the League and Opera America. And anything else we can suggest?
Yes, our partners at Opera America, Theater Communications Group, Dance USA, the Performing Arts Alliance, Contact Your Service Organization. You're always welcome to go to AmericanOrchestras.org. That's our website. By going online, you'll find ways to understand what's available to you now and how to help create more relief opportunities in the future.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you.